درود بر دوستان. امشب مهمانی داریم که برنامه ما رو به زبان انگلیسی اجرا خواهیم کرد. ایشون همسر بنده هستند. اصلیتشون اسکاتلندی هستش و اسمشون هم هست می. و من دعوت کردم ایشونو که به زبان انگلیسی سوالاتی که من دارم برای شما دوستان جواب بدن. همچنین که گفته بودم دیروز که من ایشون رو آوردم اینجا که زنده برای شما از صمیم قلب پاک و پاکیزه بدون قیل و غش، بدون هیچ گونه نظری برای شما افکار خودشون رو بیان کنند. خب با اجازه شما ما از این میریم با زبان انگلیسی. من سوالاتی میکنم ایشون که دیگه خودشون جوابش بدن، همونجوری که خودشون بلدن، یاد گرفتن. خب May, say hello to our friends.
Hello everybody, it's a pleasure to be here this evening and have a discussion with my better half, as you may say.
Okay. I would like to ask you a couple of questions. I will ask one at a time. My first and most important question for all of the Iranian, all over the world, okay, to hear from you, what is your opinion for Iranian, which is the most important question at the moment for Iranian. What is your opinion in terms of freedom, liberty? We call it Azadi. That all democratic, non-democratic, any way you can describe it, that what does it mean to individual, what does it mean to social engagements, what does it mean for anybody at all in terms of just the liberty and freedom?
Well, it's such a huge subject, freedom. Does one actually have freedom? Even in the free world, the West, we're still governed by rules and regulations, and we're still governed by other people's opinions, and you're only as free as one would allow you to be free. There are rules that one lives by. So freedom is a word that is bandied about with the understanding that one can do whatever they like. But in the real world, I don't think the word freedom is an apt word for societies that want to live in, say, harmony, which is a better word, or with to be able to excel in their livelihood without feeling oppressed. I think one should say, are we oppressed, rather than saying, are we free? Because freedom doesn't seem to have this reality about it. You have children, you bring up children, but they're governed by your regulations. You have to guide them. You have to make boundaries for them. Life's full of boundaries. Okay, we can maybe break through them, but breaking through those boundaries, are you stepping on someone else's feet? Are you making someone else's life a misery? So I don't think freedom is the word that one should be looking for. I think one should be looking for harmony in this life. To harmonise with each other.
I see.
This is how I look at it, and I think a lot of people in the West look at it as well, through this clarity, rather than be blinded by all this freedom, which doesn't really exist, not even in the West.
Okay. Now the relatively freedom, which, as you say, is less suppressed. Do you think that there are countries that they are less suppressed? Let's have a look at Iran, for example.
Yes.
Do you think they are less oppressed or they are more oppressed? Which is opposite of freedom? Do they have freedom, or are they more suppressed?
Well, I think they have one fundamental problem, is that they're governed by a religious sect, which can be very demanding on people, because they want people to believe in their beliefs. So again, I think that because it's in a religious state, that they do lack the freedom of mind that is necessary to become harmonious with your neighbours and with the people that you live amongst. In history, it's actually documented that the religion, even the Christian religion, did oppress the masses. In fact, the Christian religion actually, in the Dark Ages, actually committed genocide. And I think most religions throughout history have been proven to be violent and oppressive, and I don't think today's religions, modern religions, which is governing Iran, I think they're exactly the same as the old Christian religions. They do cause oppression, and they do murder people, and they do bring about, incite hatred, and incite people to be less of a quality than what they could be. I think they are undermined by their governing bodies, which are religious in their making.
Lovely. Can I ask you, you have been in Iran nearly 5 years ago for about 6 weeks.
Yes, yes.
You've been in Tehran, you've been
Yes.
in by the Caspian Sea
Yes.
towns, and you've been Shiraz.
Yes.
You've been saw a little bit of Isfahan, and whether you did or not, but you saw some of the countries, some of the towns, big
Yes.
towns.
Yes.
And you stayed there with families and friends, and you made a few friends and
Yes.
so on. You traveled all the time, on the plane, by land, by taxis, and so on. Can you please describe to our friends what was your taking from
My impression of it.
yeah, your impression of the journey?
My impression of the country is that the people are extremely warm and friendly, and the hospitality is first class. I didn't socialize with the masses. It was very difficult to socialise, even though I did visit a few. I went to the Shah's, one of his palaces,
cafe,
and people.
Restaurant.
No, and actually one or two people, they were eager to speak to me because I spoke English. I think on the whole, what I did notice is that the people were subdued. I find on the street people were subdued. They weren't.
What do you mean by being subdued?
They were very controlled in their ways of going about their business.
Behaviours.
In behaviour, you know, they didn't seem to have this energy, that's enthusiasm that I see in the West. There's a lot of energy in the West. People have the ability to explore their ideas. I found in Iran that they were very, how would you say, on one level, just on one level, and they didn't seem to go up or down. It was like listening to a monotone in someone's voice, you know, and it made me feel that there was a heaviness in the country, and also like they were covered. I felt that I was underneath a blanket or something. I was hiding myself, and I had to behave with caution. I felt I was very cautious going out and aware of. No, I couldn't be relaxed, totally relaxed, and be able to speak my mind and be free in the sense, or harmonious, as I said before, with other people, because I didn't know how to interact with them, because they didn't give me any feedback as to what. I only knew family, which people open up to family because you're in their home. But on the street, I felt they were a bit
non-active?
Non-active, yes. Very non-active.
In a broad way?
Yes. I felt as though I was hiding rather than being open.
Might I ask you, how would this affect them, non-activeness, if it does? What would they lose? What would they, if any?
To be inspired by individuals, and to be able to take initiatives and to explore different ventures, rather than to conform to a certain ideology or to a certain way, and having to be, underneath and in hiding, doing things in hiding, to try and achieve their goals. They weren't, how would you say it? They weren't forthcoming in their ideas, because speaking it might be blasphemous, you know, or it might be against the rule of the spiritual leaders and, of course, the government.
Blasphemous means forbidden.
Yeah, forbidden. Yeah. So there was a restriction. They were maybe overly polite, and one felt that. I did feel that there were. It was difficult to see people, what they were, what they were really like. I felt they were overly polite and overly cautious about their everyday life.
Okay. What's your opinion towards their closings in public?
Again, that was very strange because not being accustomed to covering, especially my head, because I hate wearing hats and scarves, because I feel enclosed. That was something I had to get used to, and it was very, how can I say it? It made me feel very conformed, and that I had to behave in a certain manner that was set, and I think some women prefer to be covered because they feel they lack equality probably with their counterpartner, the male counterpartner. But on the whole, it was quite uncomfortable because I remember going to a restaurant and I had to be fully dressed with a coat, long coat, scarf, everything covered. And I found eating with my coat and scarf and everything on was quite awkward and very uncomfortable and very restricting. And I think that alone brings restriction, just wearing those clothes. Again, I think that they segregate women and men to the extent where that the woman actually becomes frustrated. And I did see a lot of women there that were extreme makeup. You're trying to show everything in one face, and I thought that was very strange. And okay, here people do wear outrageous clothes to the extent that they might be obscene to others, but the tolerance of others is greater. To tolerate, not to attack others because of what they want or they want to be. That's the difference, I think. People especially women were a bit more afraid of themselves rather than exploring their own personality and sexuality. So, because covering up can bring other things like being overindulgent and secretive and maybe not exploring certain things that should be publicised or being public, abuses that can happen behind closed doors. Here in the West, everything's publicised, so that's why everybody thinks, oh, what a terrible place the West is. But what happens in the West is they publicise these atrocities that happen in homes and children and women that get abused. It's not swept under the carpet. It's brought out into the open so people can look at it. And what I felt in Iran was everything was covered up. Everything was swept under the carpet, hidden. You had to put on this sort of falseness amongst others. So one didn't know what was going on. One didn't know whether one was safe or not safe. One couldn't read other people because they were so conformed to a certain way.
Do you think this conformity, is it voluntarily or has it been sort of forced upon?
Well, what I noticed in some of the restaurants, and that, especially the women, because they're the ones that seem to be more rules and regulations put onto them than the men, And what I felt there was that they were so stifled.
Understanding.
Stifled means to be not be able to breathe, not be able to open up and breathe.
Like
to be
choked.
Yeah, to be choked with too much conformity, and not enough individual outlet. So I think things could get quite dangerous for women in that respect, because they can't explore their own mental and sexual attributes in the world. Here in the West, women fought for that freedom. Again, I say freedom, but it was a sort of a freedom in a sense. Like they fought for the vote, they fought for women's rights, they fought for sexual equality, they fought for sexual equality in the workplace, and there is a lot of positive things that come out of that. It gives them a sense of value amongst the community and individualism, and of course that can be inspiring for men and women in the society, to see someone achieving and becoming successful. So I suppose freedom in that sense, of freedom to be who you are, to be allowed who you are, but with certain standards and regulations which we're all under. So that would bring a harmony towards the society, yes.
Okay. Let me ask you, what does religion play roles into countries like Iran? What is the role that the outcome of it is? People like in Iran, they have to dress themselves like that, or they have to behave certain ways. Is this the religion in government, or do you think religion is on the whole, people are religious, or they are?
Well, that's very difficult, because in a society, in a religious society, which Iran is, it's very difficult to know where religion begins and where it ends, because everybody is so much the same. I feel that if one was given a choice, then you would see who the religious people were and who are not religious. But when one grows up with religion, it is so they're so brainwashed into it. It's part of the fabric of their life. So it's very difficult for people in that position to actually shed the religious ways. And I think I have noticed that the women of Iran are more religious than the men of Iran. I think that's because they're more oppressed by their social structure. And if they were given a chance, I think they would find that their choices would be quite different than the ones they are making now. Everybody has the right to have a belief if that's what they want, but it shouldn't be forced upon them, and it shouldn't become an oppression, and it shouldn't take away their identity. So it should be a freedom of choice.
What do you mean by identity? You mean names or personality?
Identity of who they are, personality, the way they think, the way they understand things, the way they can do things, their whole being. It should actually enhance that. If a belief should be something that should be a positive thing in someone's life, and I find that if in those sort of societies where they are governed by a religious sect, especially one that sees the woman as a threat, because they want the woman to cover, or they believe the woman needs protection, which they should cover up. I think that's undermining the ability of the woman. That the woman is very capable of being self-protective. And if the law of the land had laws to protect the woman and to give her status within that, then there shouldn't be any problem. I find that in Iran, that they are implosive. They seem to explode inside rather than come out and stand and be counted as an individual and as a respected part of the society.
Okay, let me ask you, how do you think religion in Iran is influencing people individually and socially in their personality? How is it processing this implication?
Well, I'm not an expert in those fields. This is only my own individual thoughts, and I think that lost my train of thought. What did you just explain that again to me?
Yes, you see, how does it do that? How does religion influences people's life, and not by forcing them, but how can a religious person does a religious person becomes religious? Not certainly a person with religion, but a person who is absolutely religious, or shall we say fanaticism and fantasizing religion and so on. How does this? How is this injected into people?
Well, isn't this a form of brainwashing? To wash the brain from its individuality and make
by
it
what?
one of the mass?
What's the brainwash is consisted of? What does it contain?
Well, usually fear, isn't it? The fear of something, the fear of possibly being injured, or the fear of being left out.
Okay, let me ask you, say, what is your opinion in religion?
Oh, religion?
I mean, holy religion.
Yeah, my opinion of holy religion is, I don't have a great opinion of it. In fact, I think it's very undermining, and I think it's unreal. It makes people live in a realm of make believe, that there is something more powerful that controls you or I, which takes away that power, your own power, to be able to make choices and to make decisions and to see the life in a reality rather than through rose-coloured glasses where everything is wonderful and that the so-called God is going to take care of you. I remember one religious girl that I knew, she was so religious. She went to church every week she was in all the committees, and one day she's turned around, she says, I don't have to buy food for myself. God will provide that for me. And this girl went without food for about 2-3 weeks, thinking that the God was going to come and give her food. Now, that's to one extreme, isn't it? That is someone whose belief has gone to that extreme, that they believe that the physical appearance of God is going to come and provide for them. This is nonsense. It's so nonsense, and I think this is where a lot of fanaticism comes into it, because when an individual has this deep belief that the God actually is part of their fabric, that the God is standing next to them, they feel invincible, and they believe that they can do anything in the respect that the God allows that for them to do.
And supports it.
And supports it. And of course that brings them to saying, oh well, that individual needs to be killed because that individual is not godly.
They go beyond the measure.
They go beyond the measure, of course they do. And how can that be allowed? How can that be allowed in the world, that this fanaticism can be driven by using a belief that is supposed to be righteous and supposed to be
What do you mean righteous?
Righteous, to be the right thing.
Okay.
To be the right thing to do in life.
All right. Dictating.
Dictating that. So it becomes a brainwashing. Like that poor soul that thought God was going to hand her a fish supper. And when it never came true to her,
Fish and chips.
she thought she was a bad person.
I see.
So she was being punished.
I see. So if she doesn't get that minimum requirement
yes.
from the God the superpower sitting right next to her, she's thinking that she's gone. She certainly couldn't ask for many meals to come.
No.
She was probably asking just for minimum piece of
bread or something.
But she didn't want to get it herself.
No, because
she couldn't.
She couldn't. She didn't. She thought, well, I'm okay. God will provide me with
For a piece of bread.
Yeah.
Just a piece of bread.
Yeah.
Wow. That, friends, is not much of a requirement, really, is it? If he was asking for a private jet, maybe, but just for a piece of bread, not even a restaurant meal or something, just not being, thinking that God provides that for her, or superpower. And what she's saying is like the demand or requirement has not been met, so she feels let down by God, and then what? Well,
then all sorts of things can happen then, because being disillusioned and unhappy, then there's no point in living then, is there?
I see.
Then it can go either self-destruction, isn't it?
I see.
Which is crazy. And then you've got the other extreme where they blame others and possibly take someone else's life. And this is what happens in with these religious fanatics.
Oh, the suicidal people.
Yeah, because they believe
terrorists
that they'll be
heaven. They
go to heaven and they'll be, everything's fine, or they want to murder someone.
Yes,
because they feel that the God wants this to happen. This is the direction that he's pointing. It's all madness. To me, it's all madness. It's sheer madness.
What is?
Religion.
Okay.
Religion. Any holy religion is just, people are just puppets, and the religious leaders are puppeteers, and they just pull the strings, and they're the winners. the religious leaders, they're the winners. Now, what do? These religious leaders? Preach. And that goes with Christianity as well. They just preach. And
what do you mean preach?
Preach about how good the God is and how mighty the God is.
How helpful.
And then they pass the hat round and the money pours in.
Collecting money all the time.
Collect the money all the time. I've seen it.
Has always been like that?
Yeah, always been like that.
It's always about money?
It's always been about money.
I see.
Always been about money.
So there is no God, there is no heaven or hell
no, there's
this.
Not.
What do you think about all this?
Because we're basically... They seem to have the impression that the human being has a special place in this earth. We all evolved to this position because we were smarter.
But religion doesn't agree with that.
I know religion doesn't agree with that because they are on the track to keep everybody suppressed because they want to be the top dog. They want to be the ones in charge.
It's beneficial.
It's all to do with power and money. Power and money. Just like the big moguls, just like the super rich, they want to have power and money. And this seems to be throughout the ages, it's always been, and they seem to feel that they are worthy of this position, and they'll find ways of undermining the masses so they can gain this power and position.
Okay, now, scientifically we must know that if you want to penetrate something, okay, you find the most vulnerable spot to penetrate.
Yes.
Okay. If religion wants to penetrate person or people, what is the weakest part of those people that religion will inevitably has to go through that channel and start expanding? Would it be like families are the weakest part of the society, or for example the women of the society, maybe they see as the weakest part of the society, or maybe poorest people or workers or students or kids or older people? What part of society do they see? They have to be a sense of, when they penetrate, they go through they must find the weakest part, and they start going in there and then start exploring the area. Is it
what is
in society that they see and they go in and start expanding? Took them years, hundreds of years to reach the point now. So they start building up. What do they do through families? What do they do through women?
I think through the leaders, mainly because they desired power. And where do you find power but from a powerful person?
Okay.
So the powerful person would be the leaders, the kings. They would undermine the kings and put themselves in that position. They would say, right, we're your guide. We're the ones looking after your soul. We're looking after your soul, you know, and through leaders that they've actually conquered. You see that in America, how religious the Americans are, and their spiritual leaders are all very wealthy and very rich, and they actually have a line to God. So you find that if you see the leaders, then there is a spiritual person behind them that will manipulate. And also, if you've convinced a powerful person that they need God, then the others will follow, because that powerful person is the figurehead of the society. So that's happened throughout the ages as well, through history. There's always been the religious behind the king, and the church has had armies. This I know from our history in the West. The church actually had armies that fought for the church, and they became extremely powerful and a force to be reckoned with. And you can see that in Iran now, because in Iran they have the leader is a religious clergy, a religious person, and he has an army, and he has the power to assemble a force against anything. And this has happened before. It's not the first time. This has happened before in the whole of Europe, and they sent armies to fight the pagans who had a different religion from the rest of Europe, and they fought them and killed them all, and so that they could become superior, so they could be the rulers, so they could end up with the wealth and the power. And it's all to do with wealth and power. This is what it's all about. Now there's a different aspect to that. Now you're going to have the big moguls, who are this really superpowers in comparison to Iran and smaller countries. They're the ones that have the ultimate power. So
can you name a couple, please?
Well, you've got the Gatsbys, and the old money from America, and they own all the pharmaceutical companies,
corporates,
all the corporates. They're all the heads of them, and this has been going on for years. You know, it's something that's not just happened overnight. And they can create wars whenever they want, and they can do whatever they want. So, you know, Iran, you know, they've only got so much power. They're not going to rule the world. It'd be an impossibility.
Why?
Because the corporates won't allow it. It just won't be allowed. The world is running on a certain amount of power, and they're not going to give it away.
So do you think these Iranian rulers, after 1400 years of waiting, and by pure luck, meaning by cooperating with the lefties in Iran, they came up to power and then betrayed them and killed them all off. Now they captured Iran. They're thinking that they can capture the world.
I think it's an impossibility.
That's what they think.
Well, if they think that, then they're thinking wrong.
Well, that's what they do, isn't it?
Yeah, they're thinking wrong because
they suddenly came to power. They don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, because the thing is, because they come from an enclosed society and they've got closed minds. Okay, they might know a bit about the world and how it's workings, but there are forces out there that they are much more powerful than what they are, and they're not going to achieve world domination.
Yeah.
I can't see them achieving it because the people who are within that sect are poor. They don't have power. They're poor. They can only be an irritation. They can be easily stamped out. I can't see them dominating the world. I can't see it happening.
Okay, but yeah, I suppose religion always desires to expand itself, especially with these ayatollahs.
Well, you look
they
at
go crazy.
Yeah, you look at the Christian religion. Christian religion has been going for over 2,000 years, and where is it now in the West? Okay, the leaderships there are in America. The leaderships are under the influence of a Christian religion. But I think they're more under the influence of business and power and money making than they are of religion.
How ironic.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. From power and rich, let's see. Would you mind explaining to me that how religious role, as we know, there are three types of women in the societies. One woman in society are in the West. Another one is in religious, and another one is in Iran. And we know in the West, religion had been suppressing women for a long time until they start coming out of it. And in the whole religion world, women always been pushed around.
The lesser person.
And Iran is severely women. Why do they do that? Why women are they main theme of gaining the powers to wealth and power itself? Are the women are the first target to be captured?
Well, you must remember that in the past, if you look at the histories, again I'm going back there, that women were a commodity to be bought and sold. And it was how one forged alliances by marriage. They used the women to marry into families to keep the family powerful.
Here they do that in Iran now. All the ayatollahs. One ayatollah daughter marries the other ayatollah's son.
Yeah, this is how they maintain power through marriage, to make them part of the family, so that they're obligated. So the men are obligated towards the family. So women are used as a commodity. That doesn't happen in the West anymore. There's no buying and selling of women. But it did happen. And they did it through as far back as the Russian Tsar. The Victoria's daughter was married off to the last Tsar. To keep the family, you find that all the royal heads of the world are related, because they were held that way, so that they kept it tight, a tight-knit society, so that they kept the wealth and the power within the family. And this is what happens.
Okay,
this is why they use women. This is the women's power.
Okay, but at the same time, I don't think those people, the rich people, when they got married in inter-family or inter-richness, they suppressed women. But religion, it seems to survive on women. You see, not just for marrying and keeping the power going, but also keeps the woman down in society to sort of, segregated completely. But I mean, those rich people, when they get married only for power purpose, they don't mean to segregate the woman from the other part of the society. But religion does. You see?
Yes. Well,
they
again, the woman has a lot of power, because the woman brings up the children. The woman is the one who's whispering in the child's ear. So if they gain power over her, they gain power over the next generation.
That makes sense.
So that's why
they use motherhood.
They use the motherhood.
Because they're against the woman. Those rich people you mentioned earlier on, they're not against the woman. They get married to the woman to keep the family going. But they're not against. Religion seems to be against the woman. As a result...
No, it's not against the woman. It's keeping the woman in her place.
Yeah, but that means against it, isn't it? Because they're for their own mankind favor.
Yes.
And so all the symbols of the woman in religion terms, motherhood and things like that.
Because if they free the woman from the religion, then the religion will topple.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So that's their main...
That's their main... Because the woman
source
primes up the next generation, so that it's continuous. It keeps the religion alive. So they keep the woman suppressed and fearful, so that she turns to the God for her forgiveness or for her...
becomes a holy person.
Yes.
How do they create fear in people?
Well, man's very good.
And woman.
Well, man's very good at making women afraid, because they use a tone of force.
I understand that, but how does religion influences people, man and woman, to be afraid of ghosts, of hell, or...
Because what happens is that they take away their power over themselves. Their will. So someone without will is fearful. They don't have confidence. They don't have the ability to make decisions. They feel they have to do what they're told, because that will has been taken away. And what happens there is that they become... it has a false security for them. They feel secure within that. Within that...
False security.
Yeah, within that oppression, within that place where they have no self-control, they're controlled by others, there is a sense of security. And without it, they feel fear. They feel afraid. It's like being in a marriage, and the man beats you every day. The man beats the woman every day and tells her how bad she is, and she's no good. And without the man, she's useless. Every day. Without that man, she's useless.
To tell her how so reassures her. So
every day he's telling her, oh, you're wicked, you're bad, you're doing the wrong things, you should listen to me, you should listen to me. That becomes a brainwashing. That becomes something that takes away the person's will to be able to make a decision. So that person believes themselves to be a bad person. They have to look upon the husband and say, oh, husband, I'm sorry, you must forgive me, or I'm sorry. So the sorrow comes into it. So that person is so undermined, that person can't move from that position.
Okay, now it leads me to ask you the following question. That, do you think religious person, man, is more forceful towards women?
Not necessarily forceful, but I would say a man has a way of convincing. It can be forceful. It doesn't have to be violent, but it can be forceful in a nature of undermining and making them feel that the man is superior, because the man has this ability to deceive.
So you don't think a religious society, men in religious society are more dictating? Is that what you're saying? They don't have a more dictating approach to life, or more dictating attitude.
I think
or
they have
behavior?
a heavier persona, a heavier,
more serious.
More serious. They lack that tenderness.
Okay,
I think even if you get a good man within a religious upbringing, they still have that superiority, because the society sees man as a superior. So it's
their
throughout
society.
the life in their society. Yeah, it sees them. I think man has brought himself up to this superior status
in religious society,
even in religious as well as
non-religious.
In non-religious. I think
okay,
they have that.
Yes, we can. I went over it a couple of times before, and I can I can explain that myself. But I thought maybe you know that religious men are more forceful, more dictators, as we see that in Islam, in Islamic countries like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, all the Islamic countries, they call them Arabic countries, but I call them Islamic countries. In Iran, Iran is a little bit different because the background is a little bit brighter in history. But the other Islamic nations, they don't have that brightness in history. So they are really, brought up, from day one they brought up as Muslim countries. When Muhammad came 1400 years ago, all the countries that have become Islamics, and that's their history, that's all they know, because they washed off the other part, like this Ayatollah trying to wash off the Iran from their history, and he say Iran started from 30 years from Khomeini's regime. That's what they're doing.
I see.
Oh
well,
yes,
that's such.
Oh
nonsense.
yes, because religion doesn't like history, doesn't like culture. It doesn't go with culture. You see, that's what they say. They say Iran history starts from 30 years ago, from the day Khomeini came in. That's that's the history of Iran. So anything to do with the past, so they don't mind killing you off.
Well, it's possible. Like as I said to you before today, that if someone is cut off from the rest of the society, if a small area of a city is cut off from the rest of the city, they'll actually produce their own language. So if Iran is cutting itself off from the rest of the world,
yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
then it will produce its own, even change its language, possibly. It will change internally because it doesn't have anything outside it to influence it. So it's going to be cut off, and it will lose what it had before, because they've cut it all off from their history. They've cut it off from the rest of the world, and they've cut it off from their cultural behaviours. They've cut it off, so they will become pure Islamic.
So this is what I was thinking, that Islamic, we see that from Islamic countries, the men in Islamic countries, they tend to be a bit more dictating. Isn't that because they are religious? Or is it because they are cultured? But that's their culture. I remember.
Well, if their culture is religion, if their culture is a Muslim religion, then it's a male-dominant society, because Muslim religion is dominated by men. Men are favoured. Women are a commodity, like cattle. You know, they can get herded around from point to point, but the male is superior, supreme.
That's why the dressing, they are more free to dress the way they like.
Well, you look at the figureheads. Do you see the Ayatollah wife sitting next to him at any time?
No.
Do you see her speaking?
No.
Like you do in America, where you see the president and his wife speaking together. She has her duties, and she goes out and does charitable works. Do you see that happening in
Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia? Do you
Women
see
can't drive in
women,
Saudi Arabia.
Women are not allowed to.
They get hanged for it.
You know, there's a story. A friend of mine, he went to Saudi Arabia and he had to go to a hospital for something. He had a minor problem, and he was walking down the corridor and he happened to pass a women's ward, and all the women lifted their clothes up over their face and showed their bottoms off to hide their face. Their face was more important than their private parts. What's that? What does that mean? It's so strange. And he was more embarrassed than any of them.
Yeah, I can.
I mean,
all sort of things happens.
Yeah, so to me, that was what I don't understand. I don't understand that. But I do think that it's noticeable, isn't it? In Muslim countries, the men are superior because you don't see any women.
Yeah.
And if you do see them, they all look like Mother Teresa. You know, they look like nuns, holy people, people that are untouchable. You know. So, yes, I kind of agree with you that men in Muslim countries are more aggressive.
But religion promotes that, doesn't it?
Well, it does, because you don't see where you look at the older religions. You go back to the Greek religions. They had gods and goddesses. They didn't just have one god. They had men and women.
God.
They had not just a male god. They had female goddesses as well. Even in the old Persian religions, if you look back, there was goddesses then.
Yes, of course.
That represented women. Women were represented then. Now, you don't see it. You don't see it. Even in the Christian religion, we still have a woman there, but that's Jesus' mother. And we have Mary Magdalene. And in that religion in the West, we have those women that represent women. But in Muslim religions, I don't see a woman. I don't see a woman.
There is no name of woman.
That another woman can look to as someone that she can relate to. They don't have anybody to relate to in that religion. So, I mean, if you look at all the religions in the world, you'll find that I think human society have grown their men to be superior towards women.
Religion society.
I think religion plays a big part in societies.
Because lots of crimes happens in terms of religion attitudes, isn't there? Lots of men commit crimes because they're thinking for the holy purpose.
Yeah,
yes,
of course. Well, that's throughout the ages. It's always been. It's always been that way. It hasn't changed. The only way to change the world is to get rid of religion. If religion didn't exist, the world would be a totally different place than where it is now. And there would be equality. There wouldn't be this patriarch society that governs everything. You know,
patriarch society. What kind of society is that?
Male dominant.
Male dominant.
Yes.
Well, I'm certainly working on it to get rid of that attitudes.
I think the thing is now
those attitudes,
because men were brought into the armies of the world to fight, to gain more power for their superiors, leaders. Then the male was looked upon as the great provider. And in modern times, especially in the West, man has lost that position because women don't need a provider anymore.
I see.
They can work. They can own their own business. They can own their own home.
They never did it, actually.
What?
They never needed a provider.
In the old society, they did. They did.
Yes, and how did they do that?
Because they weren't allowed to.
They weren't allowed to.
They weren't allowed to work.
So that doesn't mean provided. I see.
So they had to marry.
I see.
They had to marry to.
Oh, right.
They had to marry to be able to live.
Yes, of course.
You know, you see that in the old stories.
Yes.
You know.
Documents.
No. There's the old Pride and Prejudice, all the old stories, Dickens, places. You know, if you read back in those old stories, Jane Austen used to write about them, and how women had to marry into wealth to be able to live. Other than that, they would have to go to service, which means, you know, they would have to work as a servant. You know, if not, down the workhouse they went.
Yes.
Where they lived to the age of 20. They would only live to 20 years old.
Yes.
Because there was nobody providing for them. Men could go and work, they can live in the society.
I see.
They can be bachelors, they can be this, they can be that. But women couldn't do that.
No. That's
when the fighters came along for women's rights.
That's right.
And they were they came from the middle classes when they started to come up. And they fought for women, for women's rights. And they were the suffragettes in this country. They died for it. They went out and died for their beliefs that women had the right to vote and to live and to work.
To promote.
And you know, and to be accepted that they were intelligent beings.
Any way they like. Freedom.
Yeah, freedom, you know, so they could become teachers,
or less
doctors.
suppressed, as you put it.
Yes. And that's how the West gained its equality, and they're still fighting for equality. You know, for women's rights. The Eurythmics singer. What's her name? Annie Lennox.
Annie Lennox.
She's a great fighter for women's rights. She fights for women's rights. She's part of there's a society there that she's part of, and she fights for them, especially women that are undermined and abused. She's a great fighter for them, and that's one famous person. There's lots of famous people that I don't know, but that's one that I know of that does do that. So in the West, women are still fighting for equality.
More and more. I see. Okay then, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to wrap up the show, and I trust you enjoyed May's some explanation towards the Western society, live and truthful. This is the way she thinks, and this is the way she is,
Well,
whether you like it or you don't.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Our pleasure. Okay.
Thank you.
We bid you good night.
Good night.
And have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Bye.